Hello guys, so Jerry speaking. Oh, hang on, we're on the wrong server. Welcome to Book Reviews, episode number 17. Oh, excuse me, number 45. So we go to read you, chapter 7 of the book, Big Ideas. We're doing my iPad Pro today. So let's do it now. Let's show it. So we got for us. Chapter 7, Big Ideas. Here we go. Links in your book. Hang on. Here we go. It's gonna let me ask me, okay. That's what I'm at. Okay. Chapter 7, Big Ideas. 1970 to 1973. Here's Jim Henson looking to give him the rooftop performance. The guy Janet, boss man, Muppet, trying to shake his image as a choice performer. Jim tried for years to stage an image of all puppet Broadway show, crazy larger and more complex puppets. Okay, makes sense. Way before Thanksgiving 1970, Jim flew to Los Angeles with Fred Goss and Don Celine, something like that, to tape several short segments with laughing ingredients Goey Hawn for her first solo television special, Per Goey. We can do anything like you like, Jim help fully told Hawn's producers when that. But the Muppet moments would be brief. Hawn have crammed her our special with 5 other supportive guest stars, jogging for time. And yet the Muppet appearance will be memorable, something like that. For his first time non-Sesame Street viewers will have this opportunity to hear Kermit perform a song, but that was quickly grown close to Jim's heart, and within a few years will be well and on its way becoming a standard, something like that. During the months they were taping Sesame Street, director John Stone, something like that, and composer Joe Rapiso, something like that, will meet each week at the bar just across the street from CTW headquarters, something like that. Choice workshop stage for Barrett. Would be the two would discuss the music needed for upcoming episodes. I sit there and I will give Joe just a list of tunes I need for the music too. Stone said that. Anyway, halfway through Sesame Street's first season, Stone sat down across from the tunesmith and laid down requirement for the coming week. We need a song for the frog. From that supremely simple request come out Raspo's memorable, enduring tones, being green, never the torrents and some acceptance that C. Tora made and high hymns like that from the new decade. Still struggling with the Torres civil rights reform, political establishment and inspiring ideals that has marketed at the end of 1960s, something like that. Given the classroom in the era, then was what made Joe Raspo's tunes were so remarkable, especially a song by Jim. It was still rarely from that, never cycling or around instrumental. Jim's first performed the song from the March 1970 episode of Sesame Street. Quiet moment featuring Kermit, still on the next page. Anyway, the Darkening Forest, Raspo's lyrics, while slow and sweet, had deep, clearly complex. Sonotone structure, at times requiring a bit of virtual gymnastics to make some of the larger phrases fit the music scene. It's not easy to be agreed. It seems to blend so many ordinary things, as people tend to pass you over because you're not staying on flashy sparkling water or star in the sky, something like that. But anyway, the first take of Sesame Street, Jill was feeling a little his way around the song, half singing them, and half of taking his way through it, something like that, at times. Arriving at the end of the lines, slightly ahead of the music, performance is heartfelt. But Jim's work made the better pass the song the Sesame Street recorded later that year. Turned it slightly more upbeat, with better some of that structured performance. At times went on with that, and it was Jim performed the song more and more. He would figure out how to get the most from it. slowing it down slightly and giving it more humble and expressive feel, which made the turn in the final verse of the quiet celebration. It was some resolution in the last verse. Show Henson and that surely to her father best. When greed is all there to be, it can make you wonder why. But why wonder? Why wonder? I'm greedy, but I'll do fine. It's beautiful, and it's what I want to be. Next page. Anyways, Jim immediately appreciated the universal appeal for the song Frank Sinatra had already recorded for the 1971 album Sinatra and Company. Suggested Kermit singing the tune with Goldie Hawn. And it turned out Kermit and Muppets provided the only notable moments in the otherwise flat hour, something like that. Anyway, Hawn wasn't surprised at all that the seriously critics and nominated noticed between her and Kermit. I really found it difficult not to believe the Muppets were real. She said, they comment alive to me, and I guess I related to them for that. It's amazing. Kermit is a ball of string and felt, yet there is life in that. That Thanksgiving, Jimson's family celebrated the holiday with his parents in Roswell, New Mexico. With Paul and Betty Henson had moved after Paul's retirement from the Department of Agriculture. And Jim was worried about the effort managerially from that retirement. We might have on his father. One day he was working, the next day he was nothing to do. Jim said sadly. While Betty, meanwhile, was struggling with his health issues. Wow. In the minds of many, including Jim, the death of Paul Jr., from that nearly 15 years earlier, had recorded this effort affecting her psychosocial and mental well-being. She was no longer a smiling hostess, remembered by Jim's friends and cousins. Concerned with the health of both of his parents, Jim would make an extra effort to make them regret regularly, often permitting the Henson children to remain their grandparents in New Mexico for several weeks at a time. At Christmas approach, Jim returned to the editing room to put the final touches on the great Santa Claus switch, which was finally scheduled to air on Sunday, December 20th. Jim was cutting it close. He was working the final mix all the way through until Saturday the 19th. Wow. It was finally pulled from the editing room to celebrate the arrival of the early Christmas present. His fifth and final child, a baby girl. He and Jane named Heather. Wow. Jim raced to the hospital to next page. Anyway, visit Jane and his new daughter, passing the walkie-talkie to the rest of the Henson children. The parking lot to speak with their parents and their new sister as they wave at the hospital window. There in the great Santa Claus switch in December 1970 marked the end of the 7-year effort to bring the show to television. As well as they hoped would never bring the holiday standard Jim had hoped, the reaction from critics was warm, even in Charlotte, causing a delightful visual treat for the kids, which have adult appeal as well. Reviewers were partly fascinated with two new gigantic walk-around Muppets Jim had created for the show. A team of fussy monsters named Frog and Fig, something like that. T-H-I-G, something like that. Anyway, it was their show, no mistaking it, something like that. It was just one critic, while Valerie noted this. Henson disturbed critics like that from the new Muppets he divided. Something like that. Anyway. Especially during all the ugly Fig and Fog. Anyways, Jim was already pleased with the lovable Fog and would spend the next few years grooming the character for stardom, pushing him out in front of several live shows and television appearances. But Santa Claus Switch's most lasting character won't be Fog at all, but rather one of his nearly ominous smaller monsters. A purple Hulk-nosed creature named Snarl, who lived in a cigar box. Wow. 5 years later, the same Muppet would be recycled and slightly remodeled. His mother shows the stunt-loving Gonzo the Great. Similarly, the sidekick monsters of Santa Claus Switch further sprackles, something like that. It was Jerry Joel would come back to more than a decade later as Muppet writers tried to come up with the name of with a new species of Muppet characters. Next page. Jim spent more than a spring night say what working the footprints. Another installment of the Tales of Muppet Land series he had started here with Hey Cinderella. It was a project Jim was coming in to producing quickly, though with Sesame Street taking up much of his time. Completing the script has taken longer than Joel had hoped. Time slipping away, wrote producer John T. Ross, who have agreed to co-produce with Dana Bergenfield with that. And we don't hope have a fortune to work with. By March, however, with the script approved, Jim was making a regular trips to New York to Toronto to oversee construction of several platform sets like that. It's Robert Rod Studios. Slightly different, anyway, from the elevated backgrounds of Sesame Street. And that entire sets were elevated on struts. Could be pulled apart and moved around, giving performers and Muppets were the freedom to move easily in and out of them. In late March, 3 days after completing work on the second season of Sesame Street, Jim spent 9 days directing and performing them to footprints, something like that. A really faithful adoption of the classic fairy tale, unlike the heavily popular something like that great Santa Claus switch, which had exhausted the Muppet Workshop, something like that. Footprints relied on the smaller cast, including Kermit and a number of preceding Muppets, such as King Gosbush, Sabrina Greenerfall, and Ferenthal for Tales of Tiggerdy. Jim has also introduced several new characters, including two new to become Muppets regulars: Robin the Frog, Sweetums, the Ogre, something like that. An enormous walk-around puppet who has working eyes and gigantic floppy bulldog mouth. In 7 months since Jim last visited Toronto to film Santa Claus Switch, Sesame Street has become an endorsed hit in Canada. Wow. And would be one that goes out in the Muppets would be filming the next page. Anyway, as for Robert Warren's Studios, Ross was flooded with requests from the fans asking if they would come in the studios and watch. We just can't get into that. We don't have the room. And especially with Ross told the Toronto Telegraph. Jim to work quickly, often directing from his knees with the gossip control costume, something like that. Still pull over his head, something like that. Anyway, other times as the performers quit rehearse, Jim would stand slightly off to the side and anyway, one is Corporal Stilks shirt, something like that. Arms and forward, laughing and supportively. Jim was willing to rehearse a scene for as long as it took it to get it right. And when he was ready, he would roll tape as long as he needed. Finally, would simply said lovely, a sure sign of the Muppet performers he added what we wanted. When then completed in early April, the Footprints aired barely a month later, premiere on CBS on May 11th. The production was slick, with song performances, good songs by Joel Raposo, something like that. Anyway, the clever script. Critics were widely impressed. Jim Henson's Muppets and so homicide conceived, something like that. Became terribly fond of him, said the New York Daily News. With very glad the shows were having both kind and kids, something like that, and adult appeal. So echoed by the Christian Science Monitor. Jim Henson's Muppets were so good, said the Monitor, saying this. They may have actually corresponded to cliches, for children and adults alike. Reading his reviews, Jim likely breathed a sigh of relief. In the media, at least, he was beginning to be seen as more than just a children's entertainer. but that doesn't mean he had to stop continuously explaining himself. Good, solid entertainment is funny for young and old. Especially told Warren Poor, there is a terribly the think of chosen entertainment versus adult entertainment. It's possible to have an intellectual level for both. Still, it was difficult to combine his audience that puppetry wasn't. Next page. Anyways, just as kids stuff. People don't tend to like puppets, Jim said. They turned off the idea, but that's because puppets are generally not well done. Anyway, that summer he would have the chance to show just what puppets were capable of it, perhaps the most adult venue of all. Troubling discovery in Los Angeles in May 1971, Jim spent several days in Las Vegas one day, meeting with the virtuous Nancy Sinatra, who was hoping the Muppets could help her make her mark with a show of her own. In the town already convinced by her famous father, Jim was excited about the idea of performing in the live show in the large venue. The location Sinatra has chosen was huge indeed. The newly opened Hilton International, the times of the largest hotel in the world, something like that. Wow. Features a showroom that seated more than 1,500. A room that size would be require larger puppets, which could be more easily seen than regular size Muppets. Wow. With that in mind, Jim has set to work putting together new puppets. And this new show was on especially the sizable Vegas audience in the equally sizable room. It was hard work each evening. Jim, Oz, Jerry Nelson would that. Rehearsed until nearly 2 a.m. Wow. They returned to their hotel rooms exhausted to sleep into noon. Once the novelty of Handy casinos and the spas were off, Jim would go restless. During the day, I called Jerry Joel in California to beg for the company. A quest Joel as having a page. Joe was going crazy, said Joel. These days stretched before him endlessly, something like that. When the sun scorching down on him, Jim and Joel would sit poolside in the Hilton, tinkering and imagining the Tell Sam screenplay that had begun in the early 60s, with bouncing ideas off each other for the further Tales Muppet Land specials. When we come back, we'll continue this read. For 1 hour and 13 minutes left of this chapter. We'll be right back after these commercial breaks. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Book Reviews, episode number 45. I just came back from spending time with my mom, and she just gave me some other things and things like that. Anyway, let's get back to the show, shall we? See what we got for us. Anyway, Sinatra's show, which opened in the baking hot June 8th day, was acclaimed by critics as big, busy, colorful, exciting, and highly entertaining, something like that. But it was the Muppets, jostling for time alongside Frank Sinatra Jr., something like that. And the flamboyant boxer, Sugar Ray Robinson, something like that. Was most reviewers agreed brought down the house. We tried to put together material we thought would work in terms of large movement and color, explained Jim, something like that. Hang on, call my back, folks. I'm back, folks. Sorry about that. I have to not use my headset for the just use that for the explanation of reading time. But let's get back to it. Anyway, there's that whole feeling of brotherhood, kindness, gentleness beneath it. and all but the idea here is the tape. The Muppets were given the poisoning pollutions like that, involving the show, launching the proper phenomena routine. Feature oversized version of the Muppets he had used in the Ed Sullivan Show. Between musical numbers and sketches, Jim also took some of that the opportunity to reveal one of the most ambitious puppets yet. The two-story Biography in session figure that appeared to be made of giant pipe cleaners who danced and sang the Wilbur Dixon and Al Smith blues tune Big Boss Man. Now, the character which Jim would favor for episode that referred to simply as Boss Man, was initially a gigantic rock puppet that Jim strapped into himself to stay on stage, visually harness the puppet as he danced around the set. Peak beyond the puppetry process that one reviewer found jarring for that. Jim was delighted with the Vegas show and with the experience of performing live again. Yet, although the Sinatra show was hailed as family entertainment, appealing to more than just a preschool set, Jim was still finding it hard to escape from the shell of Sesame Street and had to continuously steer reporters away from talking solely about this work from Children's Television Workshop, CTW for short. I know personally like people to think that we all do. We do something that's my way. He told one reporter's next page somewhat impatiently. We all always working with adults. Maybe that's why we are here in Vegas. In fact, the Sinatra show has been a trail run, and partially not only to try out some new kinds of puppetry, but always also to learn what when work at the darkened stage in the large rooms like that. Working in Vegas appealed to us in many ways, he explained. Then announcing the surprising new project. I have a new mind doing a stage show, he continued. A full Broadway show with puppets, the Sinatra show, experimenting to try a few things I wanted to try on stage. The Sinatra show running smoothly, Jim hoping to take a quick vacation, handing his Las Vegas performance performing duties over to Oz Nelson's like that. In late June, Jane and the 5 kids into the station wagon to Long Victory Drive. Jim always loved to drive from New York to California, sleeping at motels, and stopping every now and then to take pictures of emojis, signs, and sights. In early July, they joined Jerry and Sue Joel. Wow, okay. At the Walrus Trails Ranch in Colorado. Spending nearly a week horseback riding, hiking, something like that. While Jim enjoyed vacations like that, he always had a tough time staying in one place for very long. Just as he had in Las Vegas, he would become increasingly figuratively as the days passed. Thinking about the projects and scribbling ideas in small notebooks and yellow pads, something like that. Slightly, something like that. Then after only a few days in Colorado, Jim and Jerry Joel stole away together to write. They were still passing pages of the screenplay of the tale of Sam back and forth and kick around ideas like that. We spent half an hour our time writing about the horses, something like that. And of course, the other half of Jim and I sat working somewhere, which was always a standard pattern, something like that, said Joel. Jim was not a vacation kind of guy, like I am, by the way, if you're wondering. Still, when the children were around, Jim lashed, next page, them to attention, and showed one always recalled their vacation. The ranch is one of her favorites. The Henson closed to our trip with a swing through Las Vegas, where Jim returned to perform with Nancy Sinatra, but closing on July 18th. then finished up the 3 days at Disneyland, a great success, Jim said. By early August, Jim was back in New York, but just in time to turn around and travel to Nashville, Tennessee, to attend the latest Puppeteers America World Conference. Jim's continued membership in Puppeteers America wasn't just a show of good faith, it was a possession. My dad always remained faithful and involved with the senior series Puppeteers, said Lisa Henson. Jim's role of puppetry to Puppeteers and the Puppeteers America, because he would believe in the values of the art as a form and expression, said Oz. When you're a puppeteer, you act with the end of your arm. Your arm is in your trade. Jim's appreciate that. Something like that. That attitude was a direct conflict with Oz, which never got comfortable with identifying himself as a puppeteer, something like that. The more I was associated with puppets, the harder it was for me to be associated with the other things I wanted to do, Oz said. Or at least that was my own knowledge of speaking. But Jim didn't have so much appreciation like that. In fact, since his eye-opening trip to Europe in 1958, Jim had learned that as he could about his long history of puppetry, reading about puppets in ancient Indonesia and Java, something like that, or studying the subtle difference in performance styles about European countries. Still, Jim refused to approach puppetry too intelligently, something like that. Whenever I hear the whole art of puppetry discussed, I'm until feel frustrated that in those things that somehow become much less interesting when it over discussed or analyzed, something like that. He said later, I feel it does what it does even is a bit weakened if you, next page anyway, know what it was doing. And it's best it was taking the deeper part of you. And if you know what it's doing that, or you're aware of with it, something like that, you listen, I have another analysis anyway, the ability to go straight in. More than anything, he was a fan. I'll be collecting puppets for display of his homework shop from that. Home workshop, anyway. He was partly pleased with the Sergeant Broad puppet he had picked up. A 4-foot knight in the full armor, detachable head eventually suited Bruce in his sword fights. That fall, between daytime work on the instance of Sesame Street's bird season, late night recording sessions when they were. But before Billy. From the Muppets Albert album, the ambitious Sesame Street-related project that featured a song to every letter of the alphabet, Jim and Jane moved to their family from the regularly scheduled neighborhood in the Greenwich, something like that, to a more suburban home near Bedford, New York. There was a big difference, said Lisa. Because we moved from the very historic building with a lot of personality to a brand new home to sell the suburban neighborhood. We could ride bicycles, get out on the walk to the bus and everything. It was nice for the children to be living in a neighborhood like this and going to local public schools, Jim said. Jane and I are both social loners. Wow. Don't think children should be anxious, but we both don't get involved with the neighbors. But that wasn't quite true. Some days Brian would cut through the woods and visit a nearby horse barn, managed with a single mother with 10 kids, and who out even her youngest children to ride their horse trap by tying a large rake behind a covered milk truck, something like that. Brian was quick to lend a hand at the wheel. I was driving early, he said disappointingly. As Brian got older, Jim would permit him to drive on cars from the street down the long carbon driveway to the garage, a task the 12-year-old Brian actually adored. next page. Anyways, as usual, the Henson home busted the projects and activity. Jim and Lisa set to work on building a high-detailed dollhouse, inspired by a real Manhattan tall house that scouted out in photographs on that ambitious project that took several years to complete. Brian built a combination strategies that will allow him to roll marble from the bedrooms on the second floor all the way for the house down the basement, while John would speed around the yard in his bike. Cheryl would throw taller and heavier around the house and yard, painting Easter eggs in the downstairs playroom, as Heather banged a toy xylophone. Wow. Assorted pets, including cats, rabbits, guinea pigs, and the ferret, fairly roam the property. And Jane decorated the house with handmade crafts and pottery. At home, we have all kinds of creative things to go on, said Jay. So if were puppets, they were made in the kitchen out of the wooden spoons and paper cups. Wow, and things like that. And it's just a general theme. Feelings like that. Creativity was always around the house. So still, there was times where even in such quiet pleasure was too loud for Jim. Wow. Pleasure when there was projects to brainstorm, scripts to be written, or times he had to need to fake. Exactly. He loved to take a chair out to the garden, sit quietly, away from the hustle and bustle of the home, and just be, said Cheryl. He needed to find the quiet time to hear himself. On Thanksgiving 1971, Jill was a featured guest for the all 9 remarkable minutes of Dick Cavett show, performing several sketches, including old standbys like I grown is closer to our face. Newer skits like Mamma, as well as new Sesame Street pieces, and demonstrating how Muppets were next page always film before. It was a fun, fascinating appearance, and yet Jim looked uncomfortable, something like that. Lupin on stage in black pants and buckle boots, wow, the slightly too short woman trying to pull over the beige turtleneck, slouching down next to the cabinet on the couch and across his long legs, something like that, in front of him. A big bear calf was slightly, visible above his boot line, something like that. As he spoke, his hands played with his beard. Wow, okay. Jim was visually nervous. He had never really gotten comfortable on camera. Even the few times he had been called out on stage by Ed Sullivan. At a moment of performance, Jim would shake hands and exit rapidly, say it was as real as possible. It took him a while to get comfortable in his own skin, said Oz. Jim reminded as much. I've sat the panel as myself, just talking, not performing my Muppets. The Muppets, my dad, he said later. Like it, sort of. I was comfortable, but not really comfortable. It was not what I meant to be here for. Frankly, I got a lot more comfortable if I was wearing a puppet. For this appearance, however, Jim, Oz, and Nelson would be performing their puppets as they sat next to Kevin on the couch, visibly interacting and living in character. He was nervous about going to the live situation, unlike Frank, who was glorious in that sort of fade, said Jerry Joel. Frank was going to work live in the work dangerous at Bled. Jim was always nervous about it, yet Jim very gamely. With Cabot and even a few times that went wrong, several tapes wouldn't queue up, and Ernie's sunglasses wouldn't stay on him one sketch. Jim always recovered, using self-inspiring humor. But if Jim was nervous about his ability to match wits with the clever Kravitz like that, the host himself was in awe and hit Jim. Wow. No matter how much you know about how this works, Kravitz told his audience, the minute you see them again, they're completely convinced from that. It's amazing. As Jim performed comedy from the couch, Kravitz, next page, was customized for that. It's hard to tell where Kermit leaves off and you began, said Kravitz. Yes, I've noticed that, Jim responded, smiling. Wow. Okay. Makes a lot of sense to me. Now, Jim spent most of this Christmas holiday working out ideas for his Broadway show. A project he would determine for stage sooner rather than later. Despite his recent work in more adult venues and more inspiring puppetry, the laboring children's performer, Jim feared, wow, was beginning to stick. It's something I have always faced with this slight condescension from that towards puppets, said Jim. Well, my kids love puppets, but so do adults. The problem, as he saw it, was the adult audience. Exactly. Thank you. At least the United States have never had the chance to see what good puppetry was capable of. The Broadway shows Jim envisioned would probably give adult audience that opportunity more important in the process when that it would help him shed the difference when that image in the media was created of Jim and the Muppets. Probably sugar-coated the kids' entertainment. Puppetry covers a wide range of stuff. Jim explained that San Diego Union patiently. This nice thing is you do it all. You can write it, stage it, build the sets, the puppets. It's a complete fame. Puppetry has been around for thousands of years. Wow, it's part of the as part of the fears when that one. And what small wooden figures serve to represent people in fears when that people represent things. It's what puppets and with puppets where you deal with subjects and in a way that isn't always possible with people. I think puppetry is expressing oneself through characters. The 4-part month since he have been publicly announced in interest to produce a 5 show, Jim had filled pages after page in his yellow pads with ideas for skits and draft scripts, scribbling them out as next page always. He always did with a black felt tip pen, then handing the pages over the assistant to type. In early December, in fact, he felt he was far enough along in the project to meet with representatives of Lincoln Center about staging the show as one of their fears. Wow. Okay. Eventually, with some of the agent of the project brand new Alice Tully Hall. There was good reason for Jim to assume the time to write for the Wide Stage show for puppets. God rest Sid's corpse soul, because I'm going to talk about this during my book reviews today. Sid Murray Croft has recently produced a traveling show, okay? Based on a live version of their Saturday morning television hit, H.R. Ponsnoff. Wow, okay. Now, sadly, Sid Croft passed away recently, and I'll talk about this in the later at the end of this program. But anyway, the success of this, which was known as Henson Associates. Wow, okay. But eventually, wow, okay. Initially in early 1971, puppeteer Wayward Flowers was an outrageous wisecracking puppet madam. It has all been a successful off-Broadway show called Complex. Wow. There was a whole world's first great puppet show they ever see. Wow. Excuse me. Jim wasn't proposing anything quite like Brownies, my dad. But one of his first notes in the show called Up This Spot in his earliest drafts, my dad stressed that it was not be supposed that the show for children. It's intended to be an adult's presentation. Exactly. But perhaps realizing that aiming the primarily adult audience might limit the show's commercial appeal. Jim has scrapped the idea and started over. While he still wanted to address more grown-up themes, write more segregated material. We know that many people would brain children just because of the Muppets. He wrote that in a quote, so that no time will be the material and the bad taste. Still, he was stir the potential inventors. Something like that. Anyway, this will not prevent this from being strong fear. Jill will write countless drafts and professionals from the show, pitched radically, even with the Muppets. The Muppets gets together, the Muppets in concert. Measuring presentation contain beautifully colored illustrations, driving complete. Next page. Anyways, shows outlines, hiring songwriters, my dad. Continuously filling notebooks with new ideas and continuing character sketches, while proposals could vary depending on whom Jim was pitching. Whoever professional founders, television executives, or Broadway producers, they always have one thing in common. This is a very usual evening of fear. Jim will write and then one pitch after another. It's a puppetry, but puppetry unlike you have ever seen before. Okay? I'm really surprised that. One of the earliest and more intuitive sketches was a piece of writing by Joel, based on an idea by Jim and Oz, have regularly considered, but never carried out at all. During the days of performing Ralph live with Jimmy Dean, we love the idea of Ralph sitting there on the huge podium. And then this collapse as you see Jim and me performing him. Oz said, we love the idea of being seen. That was one thing I love about Jim. He was never precious with the puppets. Despite his attitude towards puppetry was well ahead of his time. 4 years later, puppeteers would wildly be with the audience as they perform their characters on stage in shows like The Lion King and Avenue Q. In 1971, however, such an approach challenged nearly every expression American audiences had for a puppet show. Joel's script for then began with Ralph alone on stage addressing the audience. I'm not a real dog, Ralph says earnestly. Will real dogs have hidden legs? Do you know which I've got? Puppeteers. Well, at which point the podium behind Jim and Oz would be pulled away. Expulsion of puppeteers and started the barrier between reality and emotion. It was that theme that fashioned Jim. The cube has practically been built around it. This concept would run through several sketches and yet another performance from that. This time featuring a gigantic puppet named Clyde. Wow. Will be visually operated on stage by 5 puppeteers. Wow. You'll pay no attention, next page, always to them. Anyway. Clyde, it says something like that. Because in their own illusion, the type of that illusion is a reality, and that reality is an illusion. Typically, Jim refused to end the piece in such an incredible tone, knowing that eventually, after delivering this speech, Clyde exposed in all directions. In other pieces, there was a new spiritual edge Jim had shown the Muppets before. Unlike Walt Kelly and Pogo, however, Jim was never comfortable aiming his statual punches at individuals. Instead, he would take on higher concepts like technology, science, the generation gap, and one potential big piece, in the economy. the pleasure sketch in which a great giant rolling great face, my dad. And guys, shot finds and tax stellars, my dad, was one of Jim's favorites. He had gone so far as anyway, as to have the Muppet Billers, because size a giant face, my dad. It's a great delight in allowing performers to take photographs of him being gobbled up by him. Immediately the show, as Jim saw it, was designed to present as stories of distracting moods and scales, showing the full range of what puppetry genre was doing. It was clearly something new and unique, and puppetry is toward for us. Clearly written and imaginatively designed. So imaginative, in fact, that Jim was finding it increasingly hard to tie it together. We'll get to it in our United States 2 piece when we come back. Welcome back to Book Reviews, episode number 45. It just came back to get some water and things like that. Anyway, excuse me, I burped it. Anyway, let's get back to the show. Anyways, in early 1972, Jim was back in Toronto to oversee premiere release when that. Excuse me. Anyway, premiere release when that worked for the new installment of Tales from Muppet Land. Excuse me. Called The Muppets Musician of Bremen, my dad. Excuse me. It was adopted from the Grimm's fairy tales, my dad. Many of the Muppets in Bremen would have a slightly different look from the puppets in previous specials. Thanks to the addition of the new designer named Bonnie Erickson, my dad. It was sense of design was a bit more cartoony and less abstract than Celine's, my dad. Where Celine, next page, always. Designed and built in flat abstractions. Doing soft and manageable Muppets from the fabric and stuffings. Erickson thought and worked in three-dimensional textures, my dad. Carving Muppets heads out of enormous squares and plush parted range, sorry, that could be easily moved heads, my dad, was just one anyway, and mashed up and moderated by performers, anyway, by performers, anyway. Give the puppets a dynamic range of expressions for that. Erickson's most novel composition to Bremen would be mounted from heads, carved out for its ability villains, such giving it to each a look so bizarre, with that lifelike that one Hollywood special effects artist asked Jim how it would be done, with that how it had done, anyway, been done, anyway. He thought that we are applying the films directly to people's faces, laughed Jim. Okay? To get from excuse me. Anyways, the film heads a somber, fuzzier appearance. Jim had recently adopted a progress called flocking. Wow. Commercially used in line in the issue of jewelry boxes, okay? Flocking involved coloring the Muppets from source with average then shaking and fine ceramic fibers. The so-called flop through the screen on to glue. Wow. The initial charge was run through the wet, sticky surface the Muppets head for the Muppets heads. For that, this is usually done by sticking a pen into a puppet's face. Wow. By electrifying it. The flock will stand up pen dorsals from that, and then set the place from that. This flocking give the tertiary of jewelry boxes that what should we feel? Excuse me, a little burp. Anyway, when applied to the Muppets, when that it gave each puppet a fuzzy look. As an benefit, it also caught the light of the mayor Jim Love. Lighted the puppet beautifully on television. From here on, the flocking of Muppet heads will become a regular practice. Giving Muppets like Miss Piggy or Sarah the Wolof their soft, slightly scribbles when that appearance. Wow. Okay. Still, the progress of designing and building Muppets was always the same. Okay. Characters comes first. Jim said, then I do a bunch of sketches, and one of those will have to be a sense of characters. Next page, always characters. Anyway, the workshop staff was small enough in 1971 that Jim was still able to oversee that development and building and nearly every Muppet himself. Jim was an art director, said designer Carl Wilcox. So at least once a day he would make comments about how things were progressing, something like that. Sometimes Jim would hand the designers a piece of yellow paper with nothing more than a squiggle with eyes and ears. Wow. It was fun to play with that, said Wilcox. The initial puppet builder and puppet designer, builder, some of that. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sorry, had a lot more to put in, some of that. With the growing staff, some of that, increasing the revenues from merchandise in the match, and more contracts and legal agreements crossing his desk, Jim decided it was time for bringing in a full-time business manager and administrator, some of that, to keep an eye on the fine print and the bottom line. In March, he hired Alan Gaussman. Wow, okay. And told me there was a bit of showbiz savvy. Wow. This young man, he had served a page to Sid Kaiser's You Show Up shows. Wow. Okay. Who have earlier impressed Jim with his level head and steady head during the negotiations that produced a complex math formula that divided merchandising revenues between Henson Associates and Children's Television Workshop. Wow. That made Gaussman the industry sued with his first task, protecting the Muppets from copyright infringement. Wow, okay. The endorsing success of Sesame Street has created a demand for Muppet merchandise that ran beyond the officially licensed by Jim and CTW's Children's Television Workshop for short. Anyway, which in turn the fortunate side effect of spawning an underground market and poorly made Muppets knockoffs. Wow. Public television stations looking for gifts to give to daughters, some of that. Somebody copied Muppets images onto watch faces. Grocery stores, unable to hire the real Big Bird, threw together sloppy homemade costumes instead. Jim felt concerned about kids and the public being misled into believing that Big Bird will look at the next page. Anyways, way that still costume Big Bird did in front of the supermarket. It just saddens me, I know, said Gosman. It came from the industry, the characters, and the gem. With work completed on the Muppet Musicians of Breeman in March, it would air in April with considerably good reviews. Jim would following away ideas for installments of Tales in Muppet Land. So his adoption of Latin, and I'm scared that you guys are definitely Latin, but anyway. But social adoption of Latin, and Jack and the Giant Killer, wow. He was also interested in adopting several books that were personally meaningful to him, including the 13 Clocks, the one property I've wanted to do in the Muppets for 20 years, Jim wrote. And Marjorie Williams, similarly, the Velveteen Rabbit, which Jim bravely considered producing with Raymond Wagner at MGM Studios. None of these projects, however, were advanced for much further than his notebooks, ever. In late April, Jim took his family on a short vacation, this time making a relatively short drive to New York up to Cape Cod. As Jim flew kites in the British Ocean Air, the Henson children would chase along behind him, climbing up and down the sand dunes. The miserable snarl of the kite string served by Henson would patiently work apart the knots, roll the untangled strings in the tight ball. I was very good, Brian laughed. I found too trashable something like that. I don't know why. It was pretty chaotic at home. My brother was certainly quite chaotic. For some time now, 7-year-old John Henson has been behaving aggressively, regularly, roughly handling the Henson pets, whatever. And slowly locking his gaze on some invisible focal point of greater concern. He would sometimes pedal his bicycle madly, in circles, before wagging intentionally. I was a strange kid, John admitted later. Mostly he was struggling. He was with frustration of being severely dyslexic. Both John illustrated some of that much of it to next page. Anyways, endless energy. If you look in the old whole movies, everyone's around everyone every once in a while. You see the Bill Burr just concerned through the frame. That was me. I was just always going the faster the better. At times, we called Jay. Jim found his youngest son slightly frustrating. He and John certainly cared for each other very much, but I think that they had probably a harder time understanding each other. Despite the bang-ups and despite John was certainly concerned that he could never be badly hurt. I felt worried for John because, God rest John Henson's soul, but he's not best. He's been a Muppeteer, and now he's in heaven now. But anyway, because the guardian angel was looking out for him. Anyways, the idea that Jim found financially, something like that. Jim and Jade consulted doctors and sent John for testing. Hoping to help him overcome some of his difficulties with dementia. Looking for himself for advice on that might help ensure the dreamy son didn't hurt himself. I felt ashamed, Anyways, most likely it was John's situation, as well as Jim's own continued fascination with the brain. I feel Jim's interest in the FS show, a weekly program that's being developed by CTW with new age of goals increasing a child's biological awareness of his own thoughts and feelings, as well as his understanding and response and feelings of others. Gathered in June in the Arnold House in New York, on the same location as where CTW has conducted many of this readings, some of that. CTW acquires a child development specialist, psychologists, and educators excitedly discuss the fire rituals with such a series. Initially suggesting that the show reflects family mood of characters, probably puppets, who encounter situations that's called different types of personality or emotions. CW agreed to hold another meeting in late July, in which time he was hoped that some rough pieces of program material might be produced for a reaction from the group. Tinyville appeal that was aimed query at Jim. Next page. Anyways, query at Jim. Jim was inaugurated the premise, calling down the line yellow paper ideas, several skits that he would thought might illustrate higher biological concepts. such as a character that always sees things in abstract symbols, or a character that summarized. It was a show he told producer Diana Brakenfield that was meaningful and ought to be done. Brakenfield, however, was unimpressed. As gym producer, it was her job to look for projects that would be good for Jim and for Henson Associates. And she didn't think that was one of them. Wow. Telling Jim no, especially when he was excited about the idea or a project, was never even an easy task at all. Over the years, only a few friends and classmates and employees would ever really learn how to gently or diplomatically tell Jim if something was a bad idea or couldn't be done. One of these who were told what could and did was Frank Oz, who left diplomacy in the door when it came to giving Jim his opinion. I said to him, "This isn't bleep work," Oz said, anyway, laughing, but it felt strongly about something, It was tough, to get him to back down. Anyone can say no to Jim, which is saddens me, I know. But you have to do it a certain way. And you couldn't argue too much. You have to know when to step back. Stepping back, however, was not Brakenfield's style. It was just saddens me, I know. A raw and savvy producer with a sharp eye for quality. Brakenfield told her job in the first line of defense against Biography projects almost permanently. If she felt Jim was concerning projects that were unworthy of his name or reproduction, something like that, she would stand up to him and get angry at him. And I felt worried, and not talk to him for a while. We called Gotham Man. She would constantly deploy him and deploy his work. In this case, the CTW's proposed a fast show. Brakenfield would put her thoughts on paper. Powers and Burst were memo warning Jim that the show would be an ill-advised idea that will not only take up next page. Anyways, too much of this time moves his career in the wrong direction. I felt sorry for Jim, In my opinion, she wrote, the Muppets should be working towards making it independently, rather than tying up themselves to CTW. Attaching the Muppets to yet another CTW project, she warned. I'm disappointed at this producer. So only feeling the limited productions of Jim as a choice performer. Adult TV not been cracked, nor feature films, nor live presentations. Yeah, the big thing that people can talk about has yet to come. Brakenfield by the proposed Broadway show might be a turning point in Jim's career. Willing to dedicate himself full time to get it done, rather than allowing himself to be demonstrated by projects like the Effect Show. An overall picture of what Henson Associates have done should be doing. She included this. I do not see her spay reasons for becoming involved with the series, but you made the decision and let go. I don't know, but I just felt different at that time range, but it saddens me, I know. But anyway, Brakenfield was right, Jim knew it, after producing two imaginary poor stable pieces, and he chose not to pursue the project, and the program never got off the ground. This was just saddens me, I know, but short of an aggressive approach graded on Jim. That was a bit too relentless, but Jim said Oz should go after him. Exactly. Jim never got angry or upset. Yeah, I felt sorry for Jim. Never erupted or lost his temper. Instead, he got very quiet, probably silent. Oz call it. This quote. And and Bergenfield like to spend several hours in icy silence in the Muppet office. Office is something like that. Until smoothing things over. The following year, in the mean in California, there will be a similarly heated conversation between Bergenfield and the Augsburger Burry Bernstein as Jim Hook at the stony silence. Dahlia versus Burry. You kidding me? Anyway, Jim wrote rarely in his journal. Some months later, she and Jim will have a very frank and private conversation. Talk to Dahlia Bergenfield. Jim wrote Marilyn fatly in his journal this, and her appointment. Now, next page goes like this. Anyways, we're 45 minutes left in this chapter. Anyway, still, despite the difference in the communication styles, Jim and Marilyn represented Bergenfield's talent, and I absolutely hated Bergenfield for this, you know? And would bring her back into company A's. That was good advice. Anyway, these things were never personal, said Oz. Sesame Street related projects took up in March and the summer, as Jim spent the end of July working on the Bert and Ernie sing-along record. In August, taping of Sesame Street inserts as Reeves Studios. Still, Jim took time off in mid-August, then to Oakland for the AO Puppeteers America Conference, okay? And in September, he, Jane spent more than a week in Europe, attending the festival in UNIMA, stands for the Union de la Marne. Pronounce it. Sorry, sorry, I didn't even pronounce it. But an international organization to buy the cause of international friendship through the art of puppetry. But anyway, Jim has helped find the American branch of UMA in 1966, and in 1972, serving him American chairman. Jim was delighted to be with the ordinary to mingle with the the 2,000 puppeteers from around the world. But perhaps the biggest thrill, the trip to meet Russian puppeteer Sergei Orgarizimsov, pronounce it, sorry, whose book, My Profession, has been promoted with helping Jim learn puppetry in 1974. Wow. Okay. On October 21st, 1972, I believe, I don't know. And the property has a meeting and travel schedule, including Los Angeles meeting to discuss Broadway show with writer Gary Gilbert. Musician Billy Goldberg. Jim learned his mother has died in Biography. The preserved cause of Betty's death will remain a mystery. Some thought she had simply pined away since Paul Jr.'s death, more than 15 years earlier. I think it's fascinating that Jim and the whole family contact to live the mystery, said Lisa Henson. It was origin, partially, but also exceptions. Next page. Anyways, there's certain episode to answer questions. Jim flew immediately to New Mexico to be with his father, but a typical packed schedule demanded that he turn around less than 24 hours later to go to Los Angeles to tape a Perry Combo Christmas special. He returned to New Mexico on the morning of October 23rd to oversee his mother's funeral. Spent several days tending to his father. Only Jane was with him. The children has been left to bed for. My parents weren't really big on funerals, said Cheryl. Betty Henson's death affected James perhaps more deeply than he left on the others. Mom passed on. He confessed privately in his journal, giving his mother 3 words, more notice than he has given even in his beloved dear after her death in 1957. Wow. In December, Jim immersed himself as Ruth Montgomery's recently published book, which I'll get to that in upcoming book reviews another time, A World Beyond. And then account of life and the next stage of existence. Now, Montgomery has primarily written while channeling deceased politics from that. Montgomery's assuming a message that death is the only step toward a new level of existence was closely tuned with Jim's own unique brand spiritualism from that. I believe in higher consciousness from that, a higher geology, calling, and higher endurance, or the universe is a message brimming with hope of the son coping with the loss of the parents, which I talk about during my tribute to my stepdad, and it was a loss of the step-parent. Anyway, while after images of a Christian Science upbringing would remain part of the personal convictions from that, when it came down to it, Jim was more spiritual than religious from that, for he was always remained very respectful of religions from that. My dad would never ever be snippy about somebody else's beliefs, Cheryl said. If Jim had a sky idols, then it was opposites from that. A faith that human beings live their lives to purpose. Everything will come out as alright. In the end, as Jim Ray wrote this, I read and studied about various other ways of thinking how I like the way more religious religions from that are based on the same good underlying principles from that. I believe taking a positive attitude towards the world, toward people, and toward my work. I think I adhere to the purpose proposed from that. I think likely that we all are. I'm only sure about myself. I try to tune myself to whatever that I was supposed to be, and I try to think of myself as part of all of us, mankind, and all life. I find it not easy to keep these lofty thoughts in mind as the day goes by, but it certainly helps me a great deal to start its own way, this way, some of that. But despite discussion of things spiritual, some of that, I still think of myself as a very human being. I've have this filled compartment, some of that, of weakness, some of that, fears, weaknesses, some of that. Anyway, fears, problems, ego, and sincerity, some of that. But I think this is why we're here, to work our way through all this and hopefully come out a bit wiser and better to help God through it all. But Jim's faith is what Orr's faith, the communism, the simple animus ones that said Jerry Joel. But he really loved and also entailed a balance between darkness and light. There was that dark side of he dealt in, said Joel, something like that. And I think he kept searching in spiritually, something like that, looking at ways that to simulate some of that when it was happening. For the ways he explained the dark side, Jim felt very strongly. Wow. About the recreation of one opportunity to balance the universe and atone the mistakes in this past lives, said Richard Hunt. But added that Jim wasn't so loony, especially type character. He was just would look for into anything. Muppet performance with that. Frank Bill as well was impressed with Jim's willingness to explore new ideas and new ways of thinking. One of the extraordinary things about Jim was that he was a professional student of life, something like that. Anyway, genius he was always searching, questioning, exploring. When I first met Jim, in the early years of Sesame Street, he was going physics and palm readers. experiencing transcendental meditation from that, doing ESTs from that. Whatever was out there, he was judgmental about nothing. Wow. Over the almost anything, and probably felt that all these juries were these means on the same end, raising his levels of consciousness from that. Deepness is understanding how all things of earth were related to one to another, that every action was a reaction. He told me that for him, there were no one right away, some of that. Anyway. But that way he took a little something for all of them. We'll do the next portion when we come back. We have 28 minutes to go to finish reading, but we'll finish our conclusion when we come back. Welcome back to Book Reviews, episode number 45. I just came back from what I was supposed to be doing here and things like that. Anyway, let's get back to the book review, shall we? See what we got for us. Mentally, said Jim, believe that life is basically a progress from that, of growth from that. That we go through many lives from that. Choosing the situations and problems that we will learn through. For now, that was enough from that. As Jim coped with his mother's death, there was some business-related problems. Deal with it as well. For nearly a year, Topper Toys, one of the busiest producers of Sesame Street-related merchandise, has been hemorrhaging money. Wow. Due largely to ill-advising decision to try to complete with a highly popular Barbie with a larger, lower rent doll called Dawn. Wow. After posting nearly $10 in millions in losses, there was an awkward mess between CTW and Topper over continued license rights for Sesame Street. Wow. With Henson Associates squarely in the middle, it was certain cases like this. The lawyers of both CTW and Henson Associates would usually appeal with Jim and Joe Scooney to try to resolve the matter of personality. We got to stay together with the children. Cleveland Mercer said to Jim was usually all that we needed for our next page. Anyways, her and Jim to resolve the matter quickly in case the problems lagged with Topper. The license agreement would be terminated in January 1973. The ideal and Fisher Price swooping in to pick up the merchandising opportunity. Just after the new year, Jim took the family to Southern Vermont for the first try of skiing. Wow, okay. Despite his pause in the tennis course from that, Jim never considered himself much as an athlete. Even his own family would giggle when Jim tried to do anything political from that. When he once tried scuba diving, Lisa have nearly hyperventilating some of that with laughter, look underwater, and I saw him all lanky with his arms and legs flailing. Wow, okay. And I just started laughing. And no less, he gamely accepted Joe Stone's offer to join him in his Vermont home for a few days in January of that year. To take some skiing lessons and try out some Jenner swapping ski trails. Like every other first day skier, he spent a lot of time in his backside until he was absolutely covered with snow. We call it Stone. He was all over his clothes, his beard, and in his hair. Wow. And the end of this afternoon, something like that, Stone remembered waiting for Jim and the bottom of this mountain when he suddenly saw the skinny snowman coming to me down the gentle little hill. standing straight up, arms and straight out the sides, my that. Poles dangling. I remember telling him he looked up at the Christ in the Andes, my that. He both sat down in the snow laughing. Jim loved learning ski alongside his children. He really did like to do something with the kids. He was already good at it, something like that. But because he didn't have the patience with them, not knowing of anything, said Jay. So he approached the skiing was, I've never skied, so I was going to learn to ski with the kids. The kids love it. Next page. Anyways, well, but part of the fun was having their father struggling and laughing right next to them. We were all about the same level, said Brian, which was fun. On the May regular returns a trip to Strands with that. The family would rent a house near the mountain and ski all day in the group, except for Jay. Wow. With Zalman Strand back in the cabin, taking care of Heather. Wow, okay. Immediately, spent all day skiing, or scuba diving that is, or horseback riding, wasn't Jane's idea of the vacation at all. Just as Jane had similar earther taste in diggers with that, so as well as with her taste in vacations. So prefer casual, low-key family drives or visits at Cape Cod rather than gobbling, diving, rowdy vacations favored by Jim. Driving across country, that was more her style of fame, said Lisa, who had a more active kind of luxury trip, while my mom would stay home. Apart from the new pastime, Jim was taking an interest in the bourgeois environmental movement, participating in the spring 1973 entry special called Keep U.S. Beautiful, where he performed a musical number with monsters made from the garbage. Asteroids and flying rocks, marshmallows in the trash heap, something like that. Typically, Jim's downplayed his activism. I'm not actually not, but I do have my own personal cause. He told the Los Angeles Times, something like that. People are messing up the cities, something awful, something like that. The aim of the program is not tell people what to do, but to bring the problem up into something like that. They open that so that hopefully they will think twice before they're dirty up the streets and the roads again. Wow. In other words, there will be no heavy-hand messages. As I told his children time to time again, they remember what you are, Muppets will lead by example. Jim will continue to hire new designers and builders for the Muppet Workshop, bringing in two craftsmen who in different, next page, anyways, ways, something like that. Anyway, new, different ways. Anyway, will have a lasting impact in the Muppets, something like that. The need for additional designers for that and builders was due partly in the recent reductions for that in Don Swan's hours. On a difficult but necessary decision prompted by Swan's increasingly slow method of working. One new designer was selling and slightly enjoyed with friends, sorry. Former employee of billboards who could outjam and out-tinker even the virtual salon. Well, okay. Well, Fagras when that's performed some minor puppetry of Flaw Prince and the Muppets musician of Breeman. His real strength was in design investing in Fagras when that meditations when that I said sorry. You get the Muppets more versatilities with that. It was Fazagsis when that pronounced it sorry. For example, who would improve the eye mechanisms with that on Big Bird. Excuse me, and Sweetums. Misspoke anyway. Giving both characters a much broader range of emotions. Wow, okay. The other craftsmen brought into the workshop was a brilliant, 26-year-old Californian named Dave Galls, who had agreed in industrial design almost instructed sense of puppetry. But an awful painful lack of confidence in his skills as a performer, Galls had designed for John Deere and Howlett Packard, had seen the Muppets and Ed Sullivan Sesame Street, had become fascinated with design progress. He saw a screen watching Oz perform in his show in Mills College in Oakland. Galls later admitted he had socket Oz like an assistant. Wow. Essentially watching the performance through the telephoto lens. Wow. Galls was determined to get involved in the Muppets. As Oz's invitation, Galls spent a week watching the Muppet performers taping Sesame Street inserts in Reeves' teletape, bringing with him a number of homemade Muppet puppets to show Jim. Fortunately, Galls had chosen to be on set during the week Jim was in France for the UMIMA conference. But Bonnie Anderson was an eye for design talent. Was impressed enough by Galls' work to next page. Anyways, recommended to Jim to go follow up with a phone call. 2 conversations later, Galls found himself in New York, working in the bench in the Muppet workshop. Sketching out designs and construction, valuable puppets for Jim's Broadway show. It was task well suited for Galls, but Jim would be soon found a better way to utilize Galls' cerebral talents by putting the puppet on the arm. Wow. With new designers, countless yards of fabrics like that. Excuse me. Anyway, months of fake fur and Ben's bursting with nose, eyes, and mustache. The Muppet workshop had quickly outgrown its space in the second floor of Henson's Associates during the spring of 1973. Then Jim had rented and revolved a much larger space just as up the block at 201 East 67th Street. For the sole purpose of relocating the workshop, moving the workshop, gave Jim the opportunity to spread his desires and builders out across a large space they have entirely to themselves, while also giving the business offices to so much needed breathing room just down the street of 227. Wow. In late May 1973, following the appearance of Quick Kermit and Cookie Monster at the Emmy Awards, Jim took 13-year-old Lisa and 12-year-old Cheryl on the vacation to London and carol with that for nearly 2 weeks. Jim and his daughters relaxed at the Stay Grosvenor House in London's Poliot May Fair district, toured old castles in the English countryside, then traveled by boat across the North Sea, something like that, to Copenhagen. Jim found the choppy waters all the smoothing, something like that. Anyway. Would stand on the deck with the girls, innocently watching the diving seagulls and the boat as the boat walk in the waves, something like that. Jim's interest in foaming, softly curried water was by show a reflection of his growing foundation was his next page. Anyways, sub-coordinations on that. A topic she and Jim discussed earnestly and that Cheryl have lately been exploring his own poetry. I was starting to tap into that to figure out what that word is, a great metaphor for the subconscious Cheryl recalled. So I think he was interested in, because my father was very interested in keeping dream diaries and the subconscious and that. Perhaps Jim was also quietly trying to make sense of this disorder that had lately kept in his personal life. More and more, Jim and Jane live in increasingly different speeds. Partly it was a matter of personalities. Dad was driving fast in cars and zipping around the country roads in our town, said Lisa. While Mom had developed the habit of driving very slowly, the line of 8 to 10 cars behind her, even though when walking the streets of New York, Jim and the older children were scrolling at a rapid pace, leaving Jane having to block behind the walk more slowly with Heather and catch up in the next intersection. Anyway, it was about AMTs for short, Heather, for the current state in that always complex relationship, okay? Jim and Jane remain devoted to each other. They have built a company together. They have 5 children and still share similar organization with that. Anyway, some abilities. But lately have differences. There are differences with that and different with that, and temperament were becoming sharper and more incendiary, some of that. Jim was generously called, almost starting this diameter. I think he was selling an example of instill into us kids more calmness and peacefulness, said Lisa. While Jane, on the other hand, always felt disgust when displayed her feelings, the constant ways in which each of them expressed their emotions. Then inherently bred conflict. He was so repressed and kind of internalized when that about his emotions. Recalled Lisa. And my mother is very cultural about emotions and very really feels them. And if she gets sad, and she gets next page always very sad. She gets angry. She gets very angry. They didn't mesh that way. The difference could often make missions difficult. Jim never liked combinations anyway. He had subjected Diane Burgersfield. Wow, this is never good. Wow. The solid treatment over the sharply warned member. If Jane become upset or emotional with him, this is difficult, I know. Jim will simply tune her out. Wow, this is difficult, I know. Which made Jane that much more frustrated. I just don't know why. It was so preparatory from that cycle that was doomed to keep the two of them overly communicating. His possessive solace would make her angrier. Would wrap her up, said Lisa. And the more Jane wanted to hash things up, the quieter Jim got. Wow. Perhaps the same surge for peace. Jim was also continuing to actively explore other new age concepts that fascinated him. Wow. It was the transracial meditation class and reading intentionally. Wow. About reincarnation and swap our nation's existence, some of that in parallel lives. I think my father was very in the notion with the idea of the parallel life, says Cheryl. And wherever the parallel life is in the dream world, or the parallel life is rarely in the parallel life. Like maybe with a girlfriend, or maybe some of the other life than the one you happen to live where you are. 5 kids and your wife when you don't communicate with. I think my dad was encouraged by that notion. Wow. And then in June 1973, things are even tornier. Jim discussed with Jim when he came to call her. Correlation of depends. Wow. Right in the face in his journal, in all capital letters, a sure sign that she have gotten his attention. Whether it was frustration over being more around the suburbs with 5 children while Jim worked in the city of all hours of the day and night. Sad of her organization as a partner in the business she had helped create. Next page, anyways. Or disappointed that Jim see more interest in spending time in the Muppet performers than with her. I just don't know. Jim had clearly not enough. She was no longer inclined to go quietly at all. I think probably is wrong to one. Both of us wanted to do things our own way, said Jay. I probably just kept things inside there so long until I said, hey, look, I have a life as well. It's just not about you and your career. It's just about me as well, said Jay. It showed him that I was either interested in what the children were doing, or I was interested in what he was doing. And that was what wives do. The problem really was that was just usually talk about these things. Wow. Indeed, he was, even as James laid things out, James was still refused to engage. Part of this all caps notes in his journals, James responded that James' declaration was silent. Wow. He let Jade keep doing the talking, and that there would only depend on the chasm between them. You should have been silent now. Wow. Despite their crucially different speeds, Jim and Jane would continue to do the things married couples do, which is exactly needed to do. Married couples, you know? Indeed, Jane was always spiritually loyal to Jim, knowing Cheryl. Even when she was mad at him, putting on her best face, which is happy face, that is, as they traveled to the Emmy Awards together, attended conferences, and even celebrated their anniversaries each year. But Jim and Jade continued to move on at different speeds. As the time went on and the children grew in their emotional distance, they spanned the sidewalk between them. As they walked the streets in New York, they were only widening. Wow. Oh, wow. Things were much more firm in Jim's professional life, at least in the moment. But much as nice to say free, Jim was eventually pitching his Broadway show to several television networks. Wow, trying to gauge their interest in filming their live show stations from that for a television special he was now calling Naming Them the Muppets. Jim was sold. Next page, always. Starting the live show, coming together, he had already reserved Alice Truly Hall for 3 weeks, starting in June 1975, with an open on the 4th. Jim version of the show he was advertising would cost roughly $350,000. Wow, to open. Then $35,000 per week after that. It was pitched to ABC. He was supposed to share profits when the show, the network, engaged their backing, sweetening the deal, coordination, the startup cost at discounted $275,000. Wow. Making them even more attractive inventors. Jim has recently served the service of writer Barry Gilbert. A good fit as the two share similar comic sympathies with that. And the fondness for variety shows he have also reached an agreement with Pat Birch. The Tony-nominated choreographers with that for Grease to assist with directing and staging. And this put quite great with that the interest of Emil Ammersberg, who has overseen several to Neil Simon's with that plays. It's about taking on the role of producer. For the music, Jim has contracted with the San Francisco organization called Imagination Incorporated. Wow. Putting them to work almost immediately on the harmonical music for the surprise religious piece. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until all of a sudden it wasn't. Wow. Jim's major creative catch, Larry Gilbert, suddenly found the bulk in his time taken up by a new television show he had helped develop CBS called MASH. Now, when Gilbert and Helmer Emmy for the following year, Gilbert out on Broadway. Wow. Now, Jim wrote Gilbertly in his journal that there was no hard feelings, as Gilbert would hardly provide Jim with over contracts as he tried to hold the show together. Next, the collaboration with Imagination Incorporated with music turned into a creative mismatch, and Jim released a comedy from his Relations in late 1973, Frozen and Eagle from United Nations Incorporated, Walt Casimir. Your next patron. Anyway. You're a better artist and your client. Kramer wrote to Jim. I admit immediately when that gave the little thought how we were ever going to work nose to the face to a project this scope. I have no hard feelings because I'm so proud of the work we did. Just try to put the best face on things. I'm running investors that you have either Joe Aspo or Billy Goldenberg lined up to provide the music, and brought in Marshall Brickman, who have co-written Sleeper with Woody Allen, who helped write initial material. The overall level Jerry Joel, who have vowed to stand by, ready to draft new Muppet sketches whenever Jim might has. Despite Jim's best efforts, my dad is unwavering believes him, and the strength of the shows, the projects was disgrations, my dad's way. Quickly. Anyway, Jim was reduced when that showed the show by autumn of 1973, the fall of 1973. Anyway, for the rest of his life, he would never entirely let go of the idea. Putting together a story-produced live stage production. When the providers of the stage show faded, Jim Remar doubled his efforts of interest in networks, similarly in several new television specials. Most of the Muppet holiday specials are Halloween, Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve, but there was also an initial Fire Nation non-Muppet related promotions, including Creepy Twilight Zone-ish, The Monsters inside Jason's Spray, and the revelations on Jim's foundation was illustrations on reality and the island. An RC piece production to tell the same story from 4 different points of view. Just remember the pitch in the Muppets pop projects require both coordination and stamina. As he ever done was when wooing Jerry Joel, wow, and Bernie Bernstein a decade earlier. Wow. Jim prepared the pitch by doing and would not only describe the shows but also perform Muppet skits from pin stripping network executives, many of whom were sat by blank face as Jim, Oz, Nelson chatted back and forth often. And this will be the last part of the page, and I'll have to wrap things up for episode 45. But anyway, with puppets on each arm. It'll be a closed Oz found extraordinary. Wow. Where we carry these big, heavy, black boxes. Anyway, in cabs and to go across town and to try to sell the show the network executives. Oz said, his voice rising, the memory even 4 years later was now. Well, I'm taping this in 2026, but this book came out in 2013. But anyway, we perform it. Someone would say, "That's great, Bob." Some other bleep guy has to see this. So then we do it some more. The problem, said Oz, was that no matter how many times they perform, they never seem to have to perform the person when in the room. We could actually approve a project. Eventually, however, Jim found a professional appearance. Audience, anyway. And the young network executive in ABC named Michael Eisner. Wow, who listened closely. Laughed, apparently, and unlike many of the executives who have so frustrated us, who could actually greenlight a project. And so as Jim has his team pack up their boxes to leave, Arthur gave them the go-ahead on the Muppet-related project. Pilot. At last, Jim has said yes to the answer. Now that he and ABC on board to produce a pilot, Jim is certainly a weekly Muppet television show. He assured fame he would be wrong. So that was chapter 7 of the book I'm going to read right now. and we're moving on to chapter 8, the M-U-C-K-I-N-G, Fuppets, another time. But anyway, that about wraps up for episode 45. Hope you enjoyed that. Soon it's gonna be episode number 46, which will be about chapter 8 of the book, the M-U-C-K-I-N-G. I'm not gonna say to you what it is. Fuppets. This is from 1973 to 1975. Until next time, suggest by baby. We're going to out. See ya.